Hello there, hi. Just wanted to make in this short video, something quite extraordinary has been revealed at the Thirlwall inquiry, and it was stated on the 12th of September, so that's yesterday. There's a bit of reporting from Judith Moritz of the BBC, in which one of the barristers giving evidence there, I think it's a barrister called Kennedy, whoever said it, it's been reported. It's stating, maybe it's somebody who represents the trust, I don't know. I can't remember who Kennedy is, but it just says it's on behalf of the trust anyway. Perhaps it's a lawyer on behalf of the trust. It's hard to keep track of all these names, isn't it? Anyway, it's someone who's speaking for the trust, i.e. Countess of Chester Hospital. Kennedy says that the trust accepts that non-fatal collapses, also known as crashes in the terminology has been used over this period of time, quote, weren't recorded in the hospital's internal online register of incidents and risks. The non-fatal collapses, just to repeat it, stroke crashes, were not recorded in the hospital's internal online register of incidents and risks. It goes on to say here the acknowledgement that the deaths of children A, C, D, E, I, O and P were logged. That's the 7 deaths which were then turned into 7 murder charges and ended up as 7 murder convictions. They were logged, those deaths. What's not being said there is whether the other deaths were logged. I presume they were, but it's not being said there explicitly. But because this inquiry is completely falsely being run on the basis that there were crimes, they're the deaths that they're interested in. They're not interested in the other deaths, actually. Really. They're not going to go into any depth about them. But that's very interesting with regard to the non-fatal collapses, and that they're not recorded at all. I think we were people looking into this and talking about it on the basis that they were recorded in some way. And that's why they were sent to Evans from the hospital. But now, obviously, this reveals something, that the process was something very different. And Dr. Scott McLachlan on the Law Health Tech Twitter handle, Dr. Scott McLachlan has said this very well today, and said it very clearly. I'll try and find his tweet a minute. I found his tweet. This is Dr. Scott McLachlan. Sorry, I think I'm going to sneeze. Oh, Law Health Tech, at Law Health Tech. Think about this more fully, he writes. If non-fatal collapses were not routinely recorded, you must ask yourself, why were these ones in particularly recorded? And were they recorded contemporaneously or sometime later? Like, say, when the doctors decided they wanted to blame Lucy. That's interesting. I don't think they were recorded at all. I thought, they were recorded in the sense that a record of them was, if they weren't recorded at the time, something set off, something was engendered, making an issue of them, as it were, and bringing them into a list for a purpose. What that purpose was must have only happened. I assume it must have only happened once the police have got involved and they've got Evans on board, but that's not necessarily the case. That happened at some point in time, once, and it's Breary, isn't it? it's Breary compiling this list, possibly with the help of others, Jayaram and others, but ostensibly it's Breary spearheading this. And he's constructed this list either as an ongoing thing privately, once he's got Lucy Letby in his sights, in his psychopathic sights, once the bullying campaign is underway, once the scapegoating is underway, he's either doing that incrementally as he's going along, or even worse actually, he's constructed it once the police are involved, retrospectively. So he's gone back through all the notes, perhaps with the help of some other people, and say, oh look, this happened here in these notes, that was a near fatal crash then, I'm now establishing it as a near fatal crash based on the notes and because of the purpose I'm going to use them for. So this must have happened. So when in 2017, in the summer, Evans is sent 33 cases, i.e. 33 children, sets of notes, which must include, because they didn't include the August 2016 death, and because they're not being honest about how many deaths there were over this period of time, it either included then 16 or 18 deaths there, going back to the beginning of 2015, because there were 19 across the 2 full years. But they didn't want to even know about the August 2016 death because Lucy had left the unit in July. She wasn't there in July even. So he's been sent 33 cases. We don't really know how many deaths were there because of this issue that they're not being shown on the Freedom of Information request. But an approximation of the death. This is bizarre that you have to say there's an approximation of the deaths on the unit, isn't it? It just shows you what chaos there is in the recording and how bizarre that is. The figure that they sometimes use is 13 deaths because they keep talking about this artificial swatch section of time between June and June. Well, you know, I don't know, but out of those 33, you know, there's at least 16 or 17. It's not because I don't know, it's because the hospital and their Freedom of Information request it doesn't tally up what they're saying with how many alleged murders there have been there. Well, made up murders. And how many deaths they're saying that happened over that period, so I can't really say, but the approximation of 15, 16, 17, really don't know. Not because I can't find it out, but because the hospital won't tell the truth about how many deaths occurred. That's why. 15, 16, 17, non-fatal collapses, i.e. crashes, a synonym for the same thing. Evans chooses some of those because they all end up on the indictment. All the attempted murders that he chooses. Well, sorry, I'll rephrase that. All the non-fatal crashes that he deems attempted murders end up on the indictment out of that 33 sets of notes. Obviously, there are some that don't. But how they've been chosen, who's chosen them, and when they've chosen them is the issue now, because they weren't formally recorded. They weren't. I think we always thought before that there were bound to have been more non-fatal crashes and non-fatal collapses, crashes that occurred that were all recorded, but these were a subset that were cherry-picked by the hospital, i.e. by the consultants, i.e. by Breary and possibly Jayaram, but by Breary. But now we find it's not a case of, well, it's possibly a case of them choosing a subset, but it's a subset of a whole figure that was never recorded. So, but what he's done then, obviously, as I said before, he's either incrementally, once he's got this obsession in his mind, Breary, to blame someone for everything that's going on. He's incrementally started making notes of things, kept it to himself because it's not been officially recorded. He's kept it to himself throughout 2015 and throughout 2016, so they're all good to go when the police come in. Or he's done it wholesale once the police investigation starts and once they've got this nutter Evans on board, and the police are saying, well, you need to send all the notes to our man Evans, the police are telling the hospital, and Brewery goes, right, well, I'll have to construct all these. It's not that he's necessarily made up that there were issues with those children, but he's done it at a later time, and he's doing it. On what basis is he doing it? Is he doing it in correlation with who's on duty? I think he is. That being said, not all the non-fatal collapses, stroke crashes that he chooses to send Evans, and I'm just saying it's him. I'm saying it's him. You know, on the surface, it's the hospital doing it, but it's him. Who else is it? Who else would it be? Who else? Him in conjunction with Jair and perhaps some of the other consultants as a collective. But it's him, it's Breary. He's deciding this. He's getting it together, the package for them, that weren't officially recorded anywhere. So he's constructing it. But not every one of those non-fatal collapses ended up on the indictment. Some of them, it's possible that Evans actually stated to the police that all of them were suspicious of harm. And the police said, we just can't use all these because they're not strong enough. It's possible that he chose all of them because Breary believed that all of them. What we don't know is whether the ones that were not chosen for the indictment, the non-fatal collapses and crashes, that Lucy Letby was not on duty for them. Was that? This is quite complicated now, isn't it? Because it's about what we don't know. We don't know. The ones that were rejected, were they rejected because Lucy Letby was not on duty, or were they rejected because the police, in conjunction with Evans, said it doesn't feel strong enough or something like that? Or for what reason? Because then we've got the next problem, which is the set of 28 sets of notes. So there are no deaths in this, sent to Evans in 2018, out of which he picks almost 100%, almost getting on for 100%. 25 of this 28 sets of notes, i.e. cases, are suspicious for deliberate harm. Now, they're not deaths. They're obviously these previously non-recorded, non-fatal collapses, stroke crashes that were never formally recorded. So what that is happening in 2018 is Breary and co, but specifically Breary, looking for more, retrospectively. And yet with those 25 incidents that Evans deemed suspicious for harm, the police, they went nowhere. They were never followed up. What I'm trying to get to here is what was the motivation and what was there was one person that was driving this, and it's Breary, really, with help from others, of course, but it was Breary deciding everything that's suspicious, collating it and trying to get the police and Evans to move and agree on it. And of course Evans is going to agree, as he did. He agreed 25 out of 28 there. He wouldn't have agreed if Lucy Letby wasn't on duty for those. And the reason Lucy Letby was on duty for all those 25 out of 28, I'm saying here, is that Breary chose incidents where she was on duty rather than when there were crashes. He didn't choose all the crashes and all the subsets, looking at all through the notes retrospectively, even though none of them were formally recorded. He's delineated them by who was on duty. He's gone, well, when was she on duty? Let's see what's happened. And that looks like a crash, and she's on duty. We'll send that to Evans. And Evans goes, I'm talking about this 28 sets of notes that were sent in 2018, out of which he chooses 25. But none of them end up on the indictment. Possibly because the police say, oh, well, you're just doing too many now. It's going to weaken our case. We'll just stick with these. But you can see that the motivation at work from Evans, from Breary, then you just know that they're all in the same room effectively, whether it's done by email or not. As I've said all along for the last 13 months now, they're all in collusion. They're all in the same room to work out to maximise the number of things that they can throw at Lucy Letby here. Not because they were genuinely recorded at the time as issues, because that would have meant they would have had to look into them at the time, wouldn't it? And they didn't want to do that. They would have let them go. And in the same way as the so-called smoking gun cases of the 2 insulin cases. And who found those? Breary in 2018 again. Breary in 2018. So that's something he must have taken probably directly to the police rather than send to Evans, because we've heard it in the reporting that Evans was sent 28 sets of notes in 2018. He says 25 of them are suspicious. We know that Lucy Letby's on duty for all of them. They go nowhere. But in 2018, they find the smoking gun. Breary does. So-called smoking gun. Of course, there's a third so-called insulin case that they just conveniently drop with a very high figure and low C-peptide. They just dropped that as, well, that's not a problem because obviously Lucy Letby wasn't on duty for that. Otherwise they would have brought it in. Obviously they would have done, had she been on duty. Could they have pinned it on her? But it just shows that the other two readings are completely unreliable. Or that they're cherry-picking which ones that they want to use, isn't it? This is very interesting. I'm going to have to think about this more, what it means. We just know that it's complete. Well, as I've said all along, it's completely constructed. This is just another red flag about the construction that's new, because before we were going on the basis that there was some system of flagging up non-fatal collapses, stroke crashes, and that what had happened is that the consultants had cherry-picked a subset of them to send to Evans. But it's worse than that. They've constructed the whole list as a whole retrospectively, or possibly incrementally as they've gone along privately, because as part of the campaign to target Lucy Letby. Either way they did it is evil and shows the building blocks of what's ended up as this horrific persecution and stitch up of an innocent person. I've just done this off the cuff. I haven't thought about it. I just saw it this morning. I thought I've got to say something about it. I think it's interesting what Dr. Scott McLachlan says here. I'll just reread that again. Why were these ones recorded? Well, yeah, exactly. He's talking about the when. And essentially, in terms of the hospital, had there not been a police investigation, they never would have ended up being formally recorded. They've been collated. They've been collated by Breary, with help from others, I'm sure. Not formally for the hospital at all, but for the persecution, for the case, for the police's investigation, and only for that. So it's not as though they started formally recording them at any later point. they found them. They found them because they went looking for them. So it's retrospective, but there may have been an element of it doing it en route with Breary, because he's in there very early, focusing on Lucy Letby and wanting to blame her for everything, very early into 2015. So I think privately he's probably been making notes of all this all along, possibly, or he's done it all in one go once the police are on board. But it just shows more clearly the architecture of this decision to there's certain things we don't know. So those non-fatal collapses, stroke crashes that the hospital, i.e. Breary, I'm just going to say it's Breary really, got to Evans, I think if we knew, and if we could know, and if we were able to know that every single one of them, Lucy Letby, was on duty, whether they ended up on the indictment or not, then we can see the complete unfairness of doing it is that Breary has mined or unearthed only and decided to delineate as non-fatal crashes, and rather than all the other ones you can just ignore, only the ones where Lucy Letby's on duty. So what the driver has been for him, if that is the case, and I think it's very likely the case, very, very likely the case. God, this is very interesting. It's very dark. Obviously, it's darker and darker and darker as we go on. That's what's interesting about this inquiry. It doesn't matter how corrupt it is revealing. It's throwing up red flags, further red flags, further information. We just don't know whether 28 sets of notes were all not constructed but found non-fatal crashes rather than originally reported, and that they were sent to Evans in 2018. Were they only sent to him because Lucy Letby was on duty for them, irrespective of whether they didn't end up on the indictment or not? Sorry, I've been a bit sort of scatter about this because I don't know. There's certain elements of this we don't know what the ramifications of it are, because we don't know. You can sense it. You can sense what they've done, but we don't know the full extent of how completely cynical and obvious it is. I.e., was Lucy Letby in Breary's mind attached to all those non-fatal collapses before he sent them through the police to Evans, and that's why he sent them, and that's why he didn't send any other ones, because he's not interested. It's the same. That's it. That's what clicked just now. It's the same principle as the deaths. Only interested in the deaths where Lucy Letby's on duty, but they do send the majority of the deaths to Evans. But this is what I've always thought and believed, is that they're all on the same page. They're making out as if nobody knows what the other one's thinking, but they all know that they all know Lucy Letby's in the frame. All of them at all the stages of it. And as I said, across many videos that I've done, Evans knew which deaths he had to pick. He knew he mustn't make one mistake. And if he did make a mistake, they corrected him. You can bet your bottom dollar they corrected him. I can't prove that, but I just know that he either knew exactly which deaths to pick. In other words, he mustn't pick a death as suspicious where Lucy Letby wasn't on duty. He mustn't do that. It's so corrupt. It's so 100% collusion between the three elements: the consultants spearheaded by Breary, the police and Evans. There's so much incestuousness there, with all the elements knowing everything that the other ones are thinking in terms of strategy. Not in terms of an impartial investigation by a so-called expert who isn't an expert, Evans, but all working on investigative strategy to a particular end, which is to ensure that that Lucy Letby is blamed for these deaths and these non-fatal crashes. Not an open investigation, a completely cynical stitch-up and framing known by all those three parties at all stages of it. Collusion and utter corruption. But it is significant, this. But what would be the icing on it if we could find it out? And I don't think we're going to be allowed to find it out, because the NHS is like dealing with the mafia. They wouldn't let you find it out. And the judiciary is not going to let you find it out. Is that whether somebody could go independently through all the medical records of all that period of time, find X number of other non-fatal collapses, stroke crashes, same meaning, over that period of time, find X number of them that were never, it's not that they weren't recorded, they just weren't mined by Breary, they weren't like unearthed, as it were, and collated to send to Evans, and that this X number of other ones occurred when Lucy Letby was not on duty. So you'd then be able to say to them, well, Breary, why is it you didn't run those by the investigation and Evans? Why didn't you send those off? Why didn't you look into those? Well, what choice would he have to say? What would he be able to say then? Oh, well, I didn't do those because Lucy Letby's not on duty. Well, he's not going to say that, but that's what the answer would be. That's what the truth would be. And that's the cherry picking. That's the construction of it. That's the collusion of it. That's the con of it. That's the artifice of it. That's hidden, that's buried, to some extent. This revelation here has unearthed it, has brought it up like you're bringing a ship up out of the water. You begin to see the funnels or whatever, but there's still a lot of ship under the water. I don't know if that analogy holds. There's still a lot of material under the water, which we're likely not going to be allowed to, or unless some genuine whistleblower comes forward to say what they did and how they did it and how they colluded. I didn't think this was going to be such a long video, but I always say that, but it's just, can you see what I mean? Can you see what it is yet? Can you see what it is yet? Oh, God. There's the superficiality of with the formal world, the world of the court, and what's presented is that we're meant to believe that it was all done in fairly and with honest dealing and people trying to get to the truth, but underneath it, it's utterly rotten. But to a degree that we certainly can infer, but we just don't know the full extent of it. I mean, I infer it's 100% rotten. It's like the curate's egg, that story of the curate's egg. Well, it's good in parts. No, it's not like the curate's egg. It's not good in parts. It's rotten. The whole egg is rotten, but we can't see it because it's under the water. I'm mixing the metaphors now. Do you see what I mean? I think I'll leave it there, but it is extraordinary. What does he say here? Yeah, like Dr. Scott McLachlan, like, when were they recorded? Well, they were never recorded for the hospital. Never recorded for the hospital. They were recorded solely for the purpose to point a finger at Lucy Letby after the event, possibly incrementally as the Whisper campaign, as the targeted scapegoating campaign was moving forward. But possibly wholesale, all in one, once the police were on board. Either way is horrific. Either way is horrible, because there's so much we just really would want to know, and a truly independent person to go through all these and say, look, who chose these? Well, I was Breary, okay, and some other people, some other consultants. Well, here's another example of a non-fatal crash. Well, how come you didn't flag that up? Oh, look, listen, Lucy Letby's not on duty for that. Was that the reason, Breary? Was that the reason? Oh, no. Well, why then? Give us the reason why, Breary. Give us the reason why you didn't include that one. Why you didn't. I know they're not formally recorded, but you've decided to create a list of them, to send it through the police. But why not this one? Because you can bet your bottom dollar they're not all of them, are they? And it's also it's not just about all of them, because they're things that are, because they're not formally recorded. What's the definition of them? They're being defined after the event. They're being defined by an individual, or an individual with help, Breary with help. After the event, they're being determined, not by some prior set of criteria, but they're being determined after the event for a purpose, which is to send them to the police. Not for medical reasons, but to send them to the police. That's the criteria, based on who's on duty, I believe. But to prove that, you need to have all the notes of all the children across those full 2 years. Look at, find a similar instance where the vital signs of the baby happened. There was an obvious similar idea of a non-fatal collapse, which didn't seem to be expected, or whatever happened, that had similar markers to the ones that were sent to the police, and say, and then find, just need to find one or two. There'll be many. I believe there'll be many that could fit the same criteria, and Lucy Letby's not on duty for those. So, and they were never sent to Evans through the police. Is that why you didn't send them? Is that why you didn't retrospectively determine them as a non-fatal crash? Because she's not it only becomes a non-fatal crash, a non-fatal collapse, when Lucy Letby's on duty. That's where I'm getting at, in Breary's mind, in terms of needing to record it, or needing to work out a set of criteria to determine and define it as a non-fatal collapse or crash, by virtue of the fact that she's on duty, and they're the ones that get sent. But the ones with similar things happening, or the same things happening, or even worse things happening, even worse non-fatal collapses, if she's not on duty, they don't get to Evans. But we need to prove that. Are we going to be allowed to prove that? Is anyone going to be allowed to prove that? It would be provable. It would be provable. The answer's out there. But you need absolute full access to every medical note for every child across those 2 years in order to do it. To build the picture, to build the honest picture of what they're calling non-fatal collapses, so that you could say, oh my God, look at all these non-fatal collapses that Breary didn't seem to be interested in at all. What is it that hangs them together? And see what that is. And my suspicion is that all the ones that he wouldn't be interested in, or the consultants as a whole are not interested in, is when she's not on duty. Which tells you everything then, doesn't it? I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening, and sorry it was a bit scattered in places, but I'm just trying to think it through as I do the video, really. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.